I'm Karima Brown. It's Sunday morning and it's time for The Fix.
Africa's oldest liberation movement is at war with itself. And while some in the party wants to reimagine the ANC, others are hell-bent on destroying it. ANC stalwart Ben Turok lays bare the stark choices the governing party needs to make if it doesn't want to be relegated to the dustbin of history. So far, 2 cabinet ministers have fallen on their swords. This morning, we examine whether a cabinet reshuffle is going to help Cyril Ramaphosa in his battle to clean up the state. And then we look ahead to why certain stories are headlining the Sunday papers and what's likely to dominate the news agenda next week. The Fix starts now.
Hello, good morning. This is The Fix, where every Sunday morning, without fear or favour, we question the big newsmakers. We look ahead and tell you what matters, how it affects you, and why you should care. This morning, I'm flying solo as my sparring partner, Sunday Times and Business Day columnist Peter Bruce is away. On this program, we examine political developments with a very keen eye. This morning, we look at whether former President Jacob Zuma hinders or aids the party's fortunes. And of course, his legal woes also come under the spotlight. And to help me do this, I'm joined on the line by EWN specialist reporter Ziyanda Ngcobo. And she was, of course, on that trail with him yesterday. Good morning, Ziyanda. Welcome to The Fix.
Thank you so much for having me again, Karima.
Now, of course, we understand that former President Zuma took to the campaign trail yesterday, visiting areas such as Park, Pinetown, and so on. Given the fact that he's no longer president, does he still have the ability, from what you witnessed yesterday, to pull the crowds, to get them to listen, to rally people around the cause of the African National Congress?
Oh, definitely, Karima. But this is not surprising. KwaZulu-Natal has always been a stronghold for the former president before he became president, and of course during his tenure in the presidency, and of course now that he has resigned, he still enjoys a significant amount of support from constituencies here in KwaZulu-Natal. As you know, he started off with the Blitz Walk in Pinetown, where he was very warmly received, and the same unfolded as well in KwaMashu when he addressed elderly citizens. Now, it's interesting, Karima, that of course the former president is forming a part of the Tumamina campaign, and it's raised some eyebrows, because many would have thought there would have been some animosity given how tense and tight and tightly contested it was leading up to the Nasrec conference last year. But we heard the former president sticking to one script, and that the ANC is above everything. No individual is above the organization, and that whatever animosity or disenchantment you might have with a particular leader within the organization, that matter or those matters should be dealt with internally. But going into 2019, everybody should rally around the African National Congress. He even went as far as saying that next year's general elections are very special and they're unique to other years, which signals that he does acknowledge the change in the body politic within the country. Opposition parties likely to gain significant votes next year if surveys are to be considered, and that he even used the land question to say the land expropriation without compensation means that the ANC is seemingly under attack, and that everybody needs to rally around the ruling party.
Now, President Jacob Zuma is, of course, a tactician of note, and he would not have been able to speak so much of unity in the party if the current president, Cyril Ramaphosa, didn't have to explain on Friday that his son received a donation from the Watson family. And, of course, there are now questions about whether he lied to Parliament or not, and he, of course, disclosed fully and said he was going to pay the money back. But given how divided the African National Congress is, it must have made President Zuma a little bit more comfortable.
I beg your pardon, Karima, I just missed the last part of your question.
I'm saying the current crisis that Cyril Ramaphosa is facing around the fact that his son is linked to a donation, I'm saying it must have made the former president a little bit more comfortable, because he's normally the one who's under scrutiny for wrongdoing, for misleading Parliament. And so this notion that the ANC is above everything is obviously a convenient message at this time, because he knows that when he's talking about it, he's not the only leader that is under scrutiny.
That's right, Karima. And very interestingly, as journalists waited for the former president to give his address in KwaMashu, because of the fact that his lawyers were actually in the High Court filing papers for his application for a permanent stay of prosecution, one would have anticipated, in typical Zuma style, that he would use an ANC platform to hit out at those who is previously described as running a campaign against him. But interestingly, the former president did not even speak about his own legal woes. He stuck to one script, as I said, that everybody should rally around the ANC, everyone should unite. He even used himself as an example as well, to say, even if you don't like the person named Jacob Zuma, do not punish the ANC for this. Rather, you rally around the ANC, make sure that the ANC receives a 2/3 majority and has a decisive victory, and then you can vote out the people you aren't happy with in the next elective conference, which I found was an interesting line to add in there, to say, rather wait and use the internal structures to get rid of the people you may not like. Now, this goes back to your question about him being a tactician and him playing his cards very carefully. Perhaps maybe to his supporters, this may have signaled that wait it, hold it out. You can see what is happening within the organization to those who were deemed as being clean and having moral standing. And of course, that will play itself out. But before anything happens, just make sure that the ANC is still in power to even have any organ or any country to lead.
Absolutely. Now, of course, one of the people that were expected to join him yesterday was former Home Affairs Minister Malusi Gigaba. I read this morning in the paper that when he arrived, he had no car. There were only 2 police officers, and people are saying that this happened on the instructions of the police minister, Becky Cele. Now, we know that Malusi Gigaba a week ago was adamant that he wasn't going to resign. He has resigned. He's a very close ally of President Jacob Zuma. Was he on the campaign trail with the ANC leaders in the province yesterday?
No, he wasn't, Karima. And actually, the few hours after he resigned, I'd called up a few people, particularly from the region which he comes from, which is the General Kizenga region, formerly known as the KwaDubuza region. My understanding is that there have been discussions about how to not necessarily create a space for him because he's within the NEC, but how to welcome him and to give him enough platform within the province to make himself known. And there's already discussion about him possibly launching a fight back campaign using KwaZulu-Natal as a base. We know that he's a former ANC Youth League president, so he definitely has an appeal beyond KwaZulu-Natal. But of course, as has been previously done, as we've seen with former President Jacob Zuma, KwaZulu-Natal provides a good platform and support base for you to relaunch your career if you're facing political challenges. We haven't seen the former Home Affairs Minister yet, and even those who were organizing election programs had said that he may want to lie low just a little bit given the many challenges that he's facing. We also know now that he's even been implicated in the ESCOM reports. So it will be very interesting to see when the former minister does emerge and under which guise will he be emerging. Will it be through branch structures? Will it be with former ANC Youth League leaders, the Youth League in the province? But we do know definitely, Karima, that there is talk within at least the region that he comes from here in KwaZulu-Natal to welcome him welcome him with open arms and to ensure that he doesn't feel like he's under attack. We know that the ANC is facing discussions about a generational mix, which is basically saying that former ANC Youth League leaders are being purged by senior leaders within the organization because they are now a threat and they're basically not being given an opportunity to inherit the ANC. And so definitely from analysts, at least one analyst was saying to me that they believe in the next elective conference there's going to be a massive intergenerational battle that unfolds within the African National Congress. But this discussion of a generational mix should also be looked at closely beyond the surface, because some have argued that this generational mix, as it's been dubbed, is just another proxy for or another factional battle that is unfolding within the organization over who takes over or creates patronage networks. So it's definitely a story that will be unfolding, and we do expect that the former Home Affairs Minister will be front and center of that particular battle.
Now, just a last question on the former Home Affairs Minister. He also resigned as a member of Parliament, and of course, because he did that, he ducks the Ethics Committee for having lied to Parliament, and that, of course, has a serious impact. But he also is implicated as having lied in court. So his fight back in the African National Congress isn't necessarily going to be a smooth ride. He's going to have to appear before the Zondo Commission. He's going to have to explain himself in relation to state capture. But of course, it's all going to depend on how the African National Congress itself positions on the genuine effort to clean up, and whether they can actually clean up the organization. That will impact his tactics and his decisions, right?
That's right, Karima. But it's also important to note that even though Malusi Gigaba is facing all these difficulties and continues to be implicated within certain reports, and of course his name is also still likely to feature prominently in the Zondo Commission, within his own organization he enjoys a significant amount of support, as I've already mentioned. I know that there are many branches, particularly where the ANC Youth League is prominent, such as in Limpopo and in KwaZulu-Natal. He is still being voted in to go to the National Assembly during those list processes. He is expected to emerge again as a name to go to Parliament again when that list conference takes place within the African National Congress. So this is certainly, from a political point of view, not necessarily the end of Malusi Gigaba's career, but it does, as you've said, depend on how the ANC positions itself and how the leaders within the organization manage the issues of morality. Because as you've already said, the president himself, somebody who was viewed as having a particular moral upstanding within the organization, is also facing his own problems at the moment. And that is ammunition that can be used by those, for instance, who are supporting people like Gigaba. And we know that, Karima, there was even an attempt by the Health Minister, Aaron Motsoaledi, to stop Malusi Gigaba's name being nominated within a branch in Polokwane. And he failed at that because ANC Youth League members there stood up strongly in support of Malusi Gigaba. And this is why I was saying that the ANC is likely to face a massive intergenerational battle as it prepares for 2022. But as I said, in that discussion, though, what needs to also be looked at closely is whether or not the use of this intergenerational battle is not a proxy for another factional fight that is now being led by a new group of people, and not necessarily along the Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma / Cyril Ramaphosa divide.
Ziyanda Ngcobo, thank you as always for that excellent explanation of the future of not only former President Jacob Zuma, but the latest minister who had to resign and fall on his sword. After the break, we hear from ANC stalwart Professor Ben Turok, who lays bare the stark choices the government party is facing if it wants to avoid being relegated to the dustbin of history. See you in a moment.